Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and the former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine and Events. Since November of 2017, this video and audio podcast has been produced by the editors of CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, which is an IDG company. Our growing online library of past interviews, which are all openly available on CIO.com and on our YouTube channel, includes more than 150 chief information technology and digital officers from mid-sized to large companies across every industry. Joining us, the esteemed lineup of CIOs today is Deborah Youmans, who is the CIO of MITRE Corporation. Founded in 1958, MITRE is an independent, not-for-profit organization that provides technology, research, and development. It's based in Bedford, Mass. And McLean, Virginia, and has over 10,000 employees operating at 6 different federally funded R&D centers. And those centers are sponsored by a long list of government agencies responsible for everything from national defense and aviation safety to financial systems, healthcare, and cybersecurity. Deb joined MITRE in August of 2023 to lead more than 400 IT professionals in the Enterprise Technology Division. The tech organization is responsible for a broad range of MITRE's work in innovation and experimentation, information security, enterprise IT, business, and knowledge services. Before her current role, she was the vice president and deputy CIO at Booz Allen Hamilton, where she led enterprise solutions across the firm's 30,000 users. Before that, Deb directed Booz Allen Information Systems for more than a decade. Earlier in her 25-year IT career, Deb held software project manager and implementation manager roles at CACI International and American Management Systems. Welcome, Deb. That's quite a resume. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary Fran. I'm very excited to be here.
All right. Now, in the year and a half that you've been the CIO, MITRE has had a lot going on. You have changed the CEO. You have dealt very openly with a major cybersecurity attack. And I'd like to start with just some of your perspective on all that, what it's been like and what sort of activities you are most engaged with around that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thrilled to join MITRE a year and a half ago, and it was an amazing experience coming in. I kind of thought I knew what I was going to be getting myself into, accepting the job, and it has been that and so much more. The change within MITRE has been amazing to watch and be part of. As you mentioned, we have a new CEO that started last fall, and then prior to that, we had this very large cyber incident. And watching how MITRE responded to this and helping lead through the response was really different than what I had seen in other companies. Often, IT can be very similar in companies, and there are many things that are extremely similar. The difference of MITRE and what has been, the learning process for me is that as an independent research and development company, our goal is to operate in the public interest. And so, in the scenario of our cyber incident, we very quickly went public because we thought it was in the public interest to know and to learn. And so that was a real turning point for me to understand how MITRE works and where our mission and focus is.
Yes, well, and it's that openly discussing, and there were several blog posts because this was actually a Chinese nation state adversary that attacked, and just kind of displaying the openness around all that was something not only that I'm sure a lot of fellow IT and business professionals have read about, but it's something that you would hope would inspire other companies to deal with their cybersecurity incidents in this way so that everybody can keep learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, the CIO community is one that is extremely welcoming. And also, at most companies, there's one CIO. There's not many CIOs. And so to learn and to share knowledge, it often happens outside your own company.
Hmm.
And so when we released the fact that we had had a cyber breach, which is a hard thing for a company to announce, right?
Yeah.
Almost every company has a stellar cyber program, and they pride themselves in that. And
Yeah.
so to say we too had an attack was really humbling, extremely humbling. And the
Hmm.
support that I got from the CIO community was amazing. Not only like, how can we help you, but tell us what you've learned so that we can prevent this at our own company. And
Hmm.
so it was a combination of an offer for help and, an offer back on my side to help and share the knowledge that we had so that we could
Hmm.
all improve together as an industry.
Yeah.
From a CIO perspective, and for your listeners, the cyber attacks are what keep us up at night. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so when it happens, making sure that we can share our knowledge is really critical.
Well, it's always hard to find any kind of significant upside from a cyber attack like this. But when you then go take the risk of being able to publicly talk about it, one of the upsides you discovered was how quickly it brought you deeply into that network of CIOs, not just in the research and development centers working with the feds, but probably all over McLean, all over the Boston
Yeah.
area.
Yes, yes, and it was a
Hmm.
combination too. I learned a lot about our own company, right, and the cyber experts we had working within MITRE, because they
Yeah.
came forward immediately and asked, "Let me help you. How can I help you? I do this with my sponsor. I can share this knowledge here." And then other of my peers in industry were saying the same things.
Yeah.
How can we help you? What do you need from us? Is there anything we can do? It's
Hmm.
really just an amazing, amazing process for us all to learn together.
Yeah. Well, and I can't say I'm too terribly surprised about the generous community type response from CIOs, because we always see that and have seen it so much in the past whenever we'd have our big events or our regional events. You
Mhm.
have a table full of 8 to 10 CIOs from different industries, even competing industries, and they're all trying to solve the same problems. They're
Yes.
all, like the talent retention and cybersecurity issues and how to deal more effectively with their vendor partners. I mean, there's so much common ground, I think is what it comes down to. And oddly enough, you don't see that among the other C titles. I mean, maybe when CEOs get together, they talk like this amongst themselves. I don't know if marketing folks do it and that kind of thing, but it's always been very common with CIOs.
It really has, and I've noticed that through forums I'm part of. The
Mm-hmm.
industry can change, but the problems are the same. We are
Oh,
all fighting the same problems, trying to tackle the same problems, looking for lessons learned across the board. Because it
mm-hmm.
doesn't matter kind of what industry you're in, the technology that you have to solve for is often similar.
Yeah.
And the large problems that are facing all of us are very
Mm-hmm.
similar. So it has been kind of eye opening to see how supportive it is.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier as we were preparing for this interview were the kind of changes that you have instituted in that year and a half, which included dealing with this major, very publicly discussed cybersecurity incident. And you mentioned moving to more scalability and also to the kind of the way a cyber breach exposes internal frailties and how those are addressed. Talk about kind of the practical outcomes that you have been driving or that your teams have been driving since that all happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I joined an amazing team at MITRE. Our enterprise technology team is really fantastic. And their goal is to provide technology to all our MITRE employees, make
Mm-hmm.
sure that they have the technology that they need. We're about a 10,000 person company, and looking toward how do we scale this? How do we make sure that the solutions we provide are not customized one-off solutions, but more COTS scalable solutions that we can roll out to 10,000 people in an
Mm-hmm.
agile and scalable manner.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we learned too is the need for enterprise governance. So this definitely came out of our cyber
Mm-hmm.
incident. So the incident happened in one of our research and development lab environments, so a
Mm-hmm.
prototype environment. We have a fair amount of those. We are a research and development company,
Yeah.
but talking through how do we want to maintain enterprise governance across our organization has been a true outcome of of the cyber incident to say, as an organization, we need to take a look at our technology, we need to take a look at our decision making, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we're making decisions not on a individual project basis, but on a what's the best situation for MITRE. How can
Mm-hmm.
we scale? We may have technical solutions in multiple places that could serve one common need. And so we've set up an enterprise governance council to talk through, and specifically focused on IT. So this one is
Mm-hmm.
focused on IT. But what we did is we got representation across MITRE. So this is not anything that is just my organization on its own.
Good for you.
Um,
That's smart.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you it would fail if it was me on my if it was just a council of my own organization, it
Yeah.
would not be successful. And so when we're trying to say, like, let's
Mm-hmm.
get coordination between our groups around IT, how do we buy it? How do we manage it? What's
Mm-hmm.
the operational sustainment for it? So we've just kicked that off at the start of this calendar year. But we have great representation from every part of the business and decision making around how are we collectively going to decide how we want to invest for our technology, and where do we want to stop investing because the market has shifted or the needs have shifted. So that's helped to make some better decision making because we're coming there with data and we're getting everyone has a seat at the table.
Now, do you run that, or have you talked one of your business colleagues into running the whole
So
scenario?
I do run it.
Somebody has to be in
Yep.
charge.
I run it,
Mm-hmm.
and we are able to take many real key decisions through that council, so
Mm-hmm.
that we get buy-in. That also will help us as we start to roll changes out across the enterprise. We'll be able to say this was vetted by the governance council. We
Right.
have weigh-in from all the sectors, so that way the council members can also help champion any change across the organization. When
Yeah.
employees are like, why did you make that change?
Mm-hmm.
They will know they'll know the reason why, and they'll be able to help explain it with their employees.
Okay. Well, I know in a lot of organizations, the CIO group and the CSO group, the security operation, may be reporting to different executives. They may be working side by side. What was kind of the before and after with
Yeah,
your own CSO and the security organization at MITRE?
absolutely. So we've made a couple changes there. So
Mm-hmm.
so I, as the CIO, a peer of mine is the chief security officer. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started, the chief information security officer worked for the CSO. So this CISO worked for the CSO.
Mm-hmm.
After I started, we changed that. The chief information security officer, the CISO,
Right.
came and worked in my organization. And that was a key part of a change that I made coming in. And why, everyone could say, well, why did you make that change?
Mm-hmm.
For us, it was really important that the information security group and the enterprise technology group worked as one, that they were not two
Mm-hmm.
separate teams, because they in the past they had been separate teams. And I will say I've seen all sorts of organizational models around this, and there's no right answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a CIO report to a CISO, I've seen a CISO
Yeah.
report to a CIO, I've seen CIOs report directly to CEOs. There's no right answer. It's what is right for the organization.
Yeah.
In our
That's true.
situation, we had a little bit of a divide where it was, right hand, left hand type conversations. And we wanted to make sure that our priorities were aligned going forward, that there was not, security wasn't making changes that are separate from the technology group.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our chief security officer that is my peer, and we work through changes together, which is really good because we have a nice sounding board together, to kind of make sure we're making risk informed decisions.
Yes.
One of the big things we're taking on, and preparing for is the cybersecurity maturity model certification, which is CMMC.
Yes.
That is being driven out of DoD, but that's a key component of work we are doing, driven from cybersecurity, but impacting all of technology. And so when we approach these as one program to how are we going to manage our technology and our security going forward, it creates a cohesive program that really makes sure that we operate quickly and with one central focus.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's been so many business operational models that IT organizations have experimented with over the years. I'm sure you saw that in your previous private sector roles. And there are some where you're driving everything with the business in charge, and there's others where it's more side by side. And some of them are the federated model, or some of them are individual departments. Is what MITRE is operating under essentially a live stream of the federated model, or is it something different?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have a couple different scenarios, right? So the CIO organization runs the majority of the technology our employees use. But we also have some business systems that are run by the functional component. So like our finance system is run through our CFO office. But the key point is that we all have to work together. We have to make decisions together. Often the same data is feeding all the systems. And so when the data breaks down or there's an integration problem, it's all of our problems. And so making sure that even if there's some different parts of the organization that are also doing IT work, that we have standard operating procedures, that we have standard guiding principles that say, this is how we'll do work, this is how we'll move things into production, this is how we'll decide what's important. And making sure that we get to that. And that'll be an ongoing evolution, right? It's always a work in progress, but I do think getting the right people at the table to make decisions is where you'll succeed, regardless of where they are organizationally.
Okay, that's a great approach. Is that an approach that you have used throughout your own career, or is there a special version of it now that you're operating it at MITRE?
Yeah, so I think the difference of MITRE is the R&D aspect of it. So, everything we're doing is research and development on behalf of the government sponsor. And because we operate multiple FFRDCs, that means we have multiple, large scale sponsors. We have differing requirements. And so if we try a one size fits all, it will likely fail. And so we have to give people enough flexibility so they can meet the specific needs of their sponsor while securing it at an enterprise level. And so that's the challenge and the difference here that I found coming here versus in public sector before, where we were doing different technology work, but it wasn't the same scale of research and development that we do here. And so that's been kind of the change and learning how MITRE operates as a company.
Yeah, the shock to everybody's systems, right? Yours and in fact, along those lines, you are MITRE's first ever female CIO, but probably even more significantly, you are someone from outside the organization, an organization that is well known for promoting from within and a company culture that does not easily open its arms to outsiders. So what did you do? We've talked about some of the things, obviously, that you got going. But as you were delving into, even before the cybersecurity breach, how did you get a better understanding of the culture? How did you figure out the best way to succeed as an outsider in coming into MITRE?
Yeah. And I think, people come to MITRE and they build their careers here because the work is so interesting. The mission is so important.
And so varied. I mean, they're not just doing the same thing.
Correct.
They're not just creating, machinery parts.
Right. We are here to solve the nation's toughest challenges in the public interest. And so that creates this drive to come here and stay here for the mission, which is impressive. And it's also the thing that attracts people to MITRE. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come here, is just the unique nature of the company. And I think taking the time to understand what's the difference of MITRE, why MITRE, and really know the company, understand the culture, and then listen when people say, hey, that type of change won't work here, or this change would be more successful. Actually listening and taking feedback, I think, is really important, because there's things that may work at other companies. And I would say that's true everywhere, right? Understanding the company culture is really critical. Even as the culture is going to change, right? It will change over time, and different leaders will change things, how decisions are made, how the culture works, how business happens. But paying attention to that and really taking the time to get to know the people here, I will say the team was extremely welcoming. The leadership team was extremely welcoming to say, we're bringing in some outside leaders for a specific reason. We want to have a balance. We want to have a balance of people that have the longevity at MITRE because that is part of, what makes us essential. But
Hmm.
also, let's get some outside perspectives to look at those best practices and say, are there ways we could do things better?
Yeah.
We've
Okay.
grown pretty, we're at the 10,000 employee mark right now. And you hit a scalability factor, right? We've got to do things on a larger scale. And so that's where some best practices come in.
Hmm.
But also understanding what would work here is really important.
Yeah. Are you using the Enterprise Governance Council that you're now running? Is that a significant part of keeping a finger on that pulse,
Yeah.
or is it just one of the many missions?
It's one of the many, but I will say, even when I started, I heard, like, as we started talking about governance, I got a lot of feedback initially that this would not be a welcome change. And
Hmm.
so I had to say, okay, tell me why. And they
Yeah.
said, like, we've tried it in the past
Mm,
and it's been slow and bureaucratic and no one saw value. And so
yeah.
I think that is a real key for me to keep in mind is that if we slow things down to where the business can't get work done, we are not adding value and no one will follow this
Yeah.
path, right? I will lose everyone at the table immediately.
I
And
know.
so keeping that in mind, I think is really important. The other focus we've had recently is around data. So
Mm,
we've brought in a chief data official to help us really wrangle the data. Um,
great.
and that kind of gets us into the world of AI, why everyone
Oh,
is
yeah.
interested in AI and
Mhm.
where things are going. And really, your success or failure of AI is all about the data. Are you managing it well? How are you
Mhm.
cataloging it? How are you using it to your advantage? And
Yeah.
so we have a data challenge to tackle, which is why we have a chief data official to really help us define
Mhm.
that path forward, to make sure we're leveraging that. So those are some of the big initiatives we're working on around governance and data.
Yeah. And now you're saying a chief data official. Do you have, is it a chief data officer like a CDO version of you as a CIO, or is it someone more on the business side?
So they are on my team, but it's an
Okay.
official. It's not an officer position.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Is that because of the not-for-profit nature of MITRE
No, I
as
think it
well?
was just more in terms of we wanted it to be part of the IT organization,
Yes.
um, and
Oh,
that's
and
it fit there.
you can only have so many officers,
Right.
right? Yeah. You have to have some enlisted at some point. I know we've talked about your tech organization, and the Enterprise Tech Group is, all the work it's doing and tackling now. There is also a CTO organization at
Yes.
MITRE, correct? A
Yes.
Chief
Correct.
Technology Office organization. How is the work divided between you two, and how is that different from what you're doing? Because again,
Absolutely.
that's one of those, CTO is one of those interesting titles that I've seen move around a lot
Yes.
during my own career, where CTOs were always tech guys running the R&D labs, or in other companies, they were the top, especially startups and tech industry companies.
Hmm.
The CIO might report to the CTO. So
Yes. Yes.
tell us about that.
Yes. Yes. So I have a great partnership with our CTO, and at
Mhm.
MITRE, the CTO runs what we call MITRE Labs. And
Okay.
so within the CTO organization, they run the research and development environments that are delivering to our sponsors. So the way I think
Mhm.
about it in my head, kind of just the easiest way to break it up is
Yeah.
I provide our team provides the technology to our employees. So if you think
Mhm.
of all the baseline things that everyone needs when they come to work, their laptops, everything on it,
Mhm.
everything they need to do their work,
Yes.
the CTO organization provides the technology that they need to deliver to the sponsors. So if
Okay.
there's a lab environment that needs to get set up, that's where the CTO organization
Mhm.
leads that effort. We work in great partnership because basically they take the baseline technology we provide and then layer on top of it.
Mhm.
And so it's a good partnership between our teams. And the way that the MITRE Labs organization works is then their team is supporting the sponsors, and so they matrix their employees out to the sponsor teams to
Mhm.
deliver the work.
Okay. Um, in a kind of a before and after scenario, with before the big cyber breach and then afterwards, what were some of the more significant changes in maybe new areas that were created or new responsibilities divided up. I think at one point we were talking, you said data and AI were both, those organizations were stood up after the cyber breach.
It was, yes.
Where do they fit in? And we are inevitably going to have to talk about AI, because
Yes.
I feel like that's a federal requirement now to find out from CIOs, what do you think of AI? What are we doing? But go ahead and talk about
yeah,
that.
so one big change that we haven't talked about yet is that we created a chief engineer position within my organization. And that role, and took we had chief engineers within the team, but we combined them into one team and have them focused on ensuring secure by design from the beginning of every project, right? So we are putting extra emphasis on security. Every project should start with how are we securing it, not as a last step in the process. Often people think of security as almost similar to how I just mentioned governance. Like, is it adding value to what I need to do, or is it just slowing me down?
Yeah,
and so the balance.
The house, are we now locking the doors?
Bingo. Yeah. And so now I'm saying, do it from the beginning, right? Don't wait till the end to think about it. Build it in every single step of what you're doing, so it's not hard to make sure it's secure. And really think that through from the beginning. So that was one of the big changes we made. We also stood up the data and AI group to have a group really focused on it. We at the time had data and AI sprinkled throughout the organization because it is really embedded everywhere. But we wanted to have a focus and make sure that we were keeping that focus top of mind going forward. So those are the two big changes. I would say culturally, the biggest change is that security has always been top of mind for this organization. We are a cybersecurity expert in the industry, but I think it just added extra priority to that because it showed us we are not immune. No one is immune. And so it gave extra priority and significance to it.
Okay. Now, I want to pivot over to talking a very important word that I always end up talking about with CIOs is innovation. And one of the MITRE innovations that has been written about a lot in the last year, not just by CIO.com, but also other tech publications and business pubs, is the ChatGPT tool that earned you guys a 2024 CIO 100 award for the innovation. Tell us about that, about how it's being used and what that has been like as a learning experience for the organization.
Yes, thank you. So we integrated something that we're calling MITRE Chat or MChat into our intranet. And what we have a private instance of Azure OpenAI to do our ChatGPT. That means that people within MITRE can use our instance of MChat to leverage the AI capabilities in a protected way. So it's approved up to a certain sensitivity label, which is critically important when you're doing anything with AI, is making sure that people understand what data can they put there, how can they leverage it, and what are good use cases for them to leverage it. Because that was the other piece, is not only making sure the technology was available, but making sure people understood how to use it. Because you'll have all sorts of adopters, right? You're going to have the people that dive in the first day and say, I can't wait to get my hands on this. And then you're going to have people saying, I'm not sure I trust it. And so we've done several different things over the past year. Between the CTO and myself, we wrote the AI strategy paper for the company and identified, like, this is how we're going to use AI with a goal of making MITRE an AI native organization. And so the goal there is really like making sure that people view AI as one of their tools that they can use every single day. It's not something to replace employees, but it's something to make you more efficient. And then explaining to them, like, what are good uses of AI? How could you use it? What are ways that could help you with your sponsor? And then if you do use it, what's the responsible citing for it, right? So if you're going to use it, how do you actually let your sponsor know, or how do you make sure it's okay, right? And so making sure we've put out some guidelines around that to make sure that we're following our sponsor's business case around that. and making sure that we're using it appropriately. We hold regular AI sessions. We hold AI technical exchange meetings on a quarterly basis across the company,
Mm-hmm.
to really get this company and more involved with the technology that a lot of them really want to use.
Okay.
And
But
then
you
one
do
of
it in that secure by design kind of environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the big thing last year that we did was a large partnership with NVIDIA to build the
Mm-hmm.
federal AI sandbox. And so that is a technology where we have purchased an NVIDIA SuperPod to leverage and let the government use. And so
Mm-hmm.
the whole goal of that is to help the government understand what are the right training models to use with this significant level of compute,
Yeah.
and also share lessons learned. Like if they were to want to buy a super pod, what does that look like? And how do you go from the idea of thinking you want to buy a super pod to actually being in operations? And
Mm-hmm.
what does it take to run that? So we aren't set up to like run super pods. That's not the goal. The goal is to be a test ground, right? That's why we called it a sandbox, so that
Yeah.
our government sponsors can come in with their data, run it in the model, see what they get out of it, and see if it's what they want to take into a production use.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about becoming an AI native organization. Now, it
Yeah.
may be that I'm just like falling out of touch here. I often have conversations with CIOs about becoming more digital native.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, about educating their entire workforce in IT, naturally, but outside of IT as well. Are you using AI native organization in that same kind of mental mindset that a couple of years ago CIOs were trying to get more digital tools into the hands of willing employees in the companies? And like, yes, I'm down with upgrading myself on this tool, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay.
And we've had conversations of, is AI native the right term? What does it mean? And then how do
Yeah.
people know if they're moving on that path, right? And then
Yeah.
what will the next thing be, right? It's AI now. 10 years from now, what will it be?
Yeah.
But really just making sure we have the right tools for our employees, and we're training them and giving them the opportunity to actually learn and use those with their work.
And so when you say AI native, you really mean AI very comfortably and assuredly, I understand what it is, how I'm using it, where it's coming from, all that sort of
Exactly.
thing. It's a
Exactly.
depth of comfort and education going on in that
Exactly. And
environment. Right.
understanding like this is the right use of AI. This is going to help me.
Yeah,
Because just using AI to use AI doesn't do anything for anyone.
that's true. Yes, I know. I've had so many CIOs over the years say that, well, the last thing you want to be accused of is technology for technology's sake.
It's exactly right.
And I don't think I've ever run into anybody who would admit to doing that.
Correct.
But, it's just, then again, you're dealing with engineers and scientists and technical people who
Yes.
really do enjoy playing with technology. I think you said that there were a whole lot of digital tools, that you had almost a digital sprawl
Yes.
that you've been working on. Is that the kind of part of the new rationalizing around, like what needs to get transferred over and cut back? Is it just the extensive use of every tool out there? I've heard CIOs call that data modernization, but it would be digital modernization
Yes.
in a way. So what are you doing around that? What is the
Yes.
approach?
Yes, that is a large challenge for us, to be very honest. We have technology sprawl everywhere. And there
Well,
isn't.
kind of as you should. I mean, you are MITRE
Yes,
Corporation, right?
yes. And there's not an engineer here that would say, I don't need that tool. Or if one would say it, someone else would say, no, wait, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
And so we have, as most CIOs, we have significant pressures around rising software costs, and decreasing budgets, right? Year over year, the
Mhm.
goal is to say, how do we make ourselves as efficient as possible? How do we
Mhm.
make sure that every penny we are spending is delivering value? And how do we do it when vendors have escalation clauses that increase, from a maintenance
Mhm.
perspective? Even if you're just buying the same, your
Yeah.
prices are going to go up. And
Right.
so making sure that we're making smart choices,
Mhm.
and for the benefit of all of MITRE. So often we have to say, okay, maybe this tool is good for this group of people, but is it good for everyone at MITRE? And is it giving the value for everyone at MITRE? And looking at different cost models. So, there's a cost model that everyone pays for everything. And then there's a cost model of, well, if this is a bespoke tool for a certain subset of users, maybe only those users pay for it. I've seen a couple different models, outside, prior to coming here as well as here. There's different models you can apply in terms of how do you want to manage the IT spend. We've also spent a considerable amount of time doing IT benchmarking. So taking a look at our costs compared to our peers, taking a look at where do we spend money, and making sure that it's actually at the end of the day giving value. And so that gets to being transparent about the costs and having a really good communication line with the people that are using your products, so they can say, okay, well, that's a good value for what we're spending.
Yeah. Well, and there's a real human element in that where you have to explain and justify to the people that you're taking away a tool.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you can't be doing that on SharePoint anymore, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And there is, for every person you ask, you're going to get a different answer. And so each tool is here for a reason. There's a reason that someone bought something. And so making sure we get to the bottom of that so that we can say, all right, so if we have two tools doing the same thing, let's pick one. Yeah. And that'll be the primary going forward.
Okay. Well, along those lines, since we're kind of skirting around all the people issues that you have to deal with as a CIO, tell me about your talent acquisition and retention programs. I know that your CEO's tagline, your new CEO's tagline is mission first, people always.
Yes.
And that sounds very lovely. It sounds very lofty, but it probably also translates into something to do with hiring and talent development and all that. So I want you to talk about that piece of it.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned a little earlier, people come here for the mission. They feel firmly about making sure that we are tackling the nation's toughest challenges and solving these problems for our sponsors. And so they come here for that mission. But the people always part of it is, how do we make sure that we are providing what our employees need to develop their careers? We have a healthy intern program that we have some high school interns as well as college interns that is a huge pipeline for us in terms of getting people into our workforce. So, we have repeat interns that come year over year and then end up being hired. And then really we have a significant kind of employee education program, many advanced degrees here. So a strong emphasis on making sure that our employees have the knowledge and the training that they need to further their skills, so that we can make sure we are always having the current technology, we have the right technology, and the right knowledge to help our sectors and our sponsors deliver on their goals. So a lot of what we're focused on is like system engineering, and really making sure that we're taking a systems approach to problems. But like everyone else, there's always a retention problem, right? It is always hard to find talent in industry and then keep that talent. And so making sure that you've got the right programs that the employees need going forward.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't know if this will be discouraging or encouraging, but in the couple of decades that I've been following IT leadership and CIOs, there are top 3 issues that we always have been talking about is talent and cybersecurity, and then business alignment. And that it can almost get a little boring, from a media standpoint, because it's like, oh, that again? Yes, of course we need to, but of course under the technology, and it's funny how it's not technology. It's not like the latest and greatest technologies. It's all about managing people and managing the IT spend and making sure you're supplying for the business. But speaking of that, I think we've talked about your most strategic business and tech priorities so far. I know the CMMC certification, making the Fed AI sandbox operational. Is there anything else on your list of really very strategic things that are happening under your purview as the CIO that I should have asked about but haven't so far?
I mean, we are always one of the big things is around modernizing our infrastructure and making sure that we are prepared for what's next.
Yeah.
As we think about what will we need for agentic AI, quantum
Hmm.
computing. The minute that we go down a path of one, of like the federal AI sandbox, the question
Hmm.
is, okay, so now what is next? Where are we headed next? And how do we make sure that we're prepared for what's next? And I think that actually
Yeah.
gets into some of the reason why governance is so important. If we don't make sure we're making really good decisions, we won't be prepared for what's next. We won't be ready to take on what's next because we're so
Yeah.
busy keeping the lights on. And I think that is the common problem, across CIOs is how do you balance innovation with just sustainment and operations of what you have today and making
Exactly.
sure you have the right mix. You have to be able to do both and make sure your portfolio is balanced.
Hmm.
But often the sustainment and operations take over all of it and really making sure you can carve out enough for the transformation to be prepared for what's coming next.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's one word we haven't used a lot of in this, and yet you've been talking about a lot of it is transformation, about
Mhm.
moving organizations along. I remember at one of our events years ago, I think it was the CIO of General Motors had been interviewed many times about an ongoing transformation, and we had one of the reporters was on stage interviewing him and asked him. He said, "Okay, the Wall Street Journal's written about the big transformation underway. When's it going to be done?" And he laughed out loud, and he said, "It is never done because the minute you stop transforming, it's like sharks that stop moving. You're dead in the water kind of thing."
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
and there's always something new coming. And
Hmm.
so I think and at every company, people only
Yes,
want to work on the new stuff, right? They don't necessarily want to
that's right.
keep the care and feeding of the old is the hardest part to get people to keep
Yes.
working on. So, and it's also the hardest thing to retire, right? No one wants to let go
Yeah.
of it. They'd like to keep it forever. It's like you never want to give away the things, your favorite sweater, similar to
Yes.
that.
It's kind of hard to innovate if you're not willing to change anything,
Correct.
because the very nature of innovation is that. And so many CIOs have said that, well, right now we're probably 80% keeping the lights on and 20% innovation, and I'd like it to be more 50-50.
Yeah.
If you had to put percentage numbers on it at MITRE right now, where are you and where would you like to end up?
Right. I mean, I would, from a dollars and cents, we might be on the 90-10. I'd love to be 80-20.
Oh, all right. That
And
sounds good then,
I
huh?
would love to be
Yeah.
80-20. And I think the question is, it is the carving out, it's carving out the time and the
Hmm.
money and the investment for the new.
Yeah.
And so some of that, a lot of times the innovation comes from like a strategic innovation fund, right? Not the
Yeah.
original IT operations fund, but then it moves into IT once it's in operations,
Hmm.
which then means you've got to make room for that. And so that's
Right.
the preparing for the operations kind of going forward, which is really critical.
Hmm.
Um, as you plan to kind of keep the ecosystem always current.
Yeah. And do you feel like that and this that plays into my final question about what you've learned about your own leadership style, moving from private sector CIO into this not-for-profit model at MITRE, but the money really matters. You can say not nonprofit and not-for-profit, but every dollar is still being kept track of.
Yes.
So is there anything you feel like you've been able to bring from the private sector that has really helped you in your role as the
Yeah.
CIO at MITRE?
Absolutely. I think that, there's so much that I learned in the private sector, before coming here
Mm-hmm.
at Booz Allen and CICI that applies here. So much of it is the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? The managing people, managing budgets, managing technical implementations, those are all the same.
Yeah.
I think the key that I've learned kind of coming here is really trust my intuition. That's been a key thing. The experience I have is very relevant here, and
Mm-hmm.
also empower the teams. We have just great teams here that are willing to take on those challenges, and the more that you can listen to them, empower them, and embrace the challenges together, it's just it's amazing to watch as the teams take on these challenges because it's what excites them. It's what makes people interested in coming to work every day.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to come to work if it's boring. The
Well,
challenges are what make it interesting. And
yeah.
so making sure that, I'm providing enough guidance, but also letting the team tackle those challenges because they're the experts at it and they can really thrive in that capacity.
Yeah, well, and if they feel respected and acknowledged for their contributions, they're probably a lot more willing to listen to all that boring talk about governance.
Yes, that's exactly right. That is exactly right.
That used to, we had so many arguments over the years at CIO Magazine when we'd be coming up with cover story ideas. And inevitably, somebody will say, we could do a cover story on governance. And all these very non-technical editors and writers around the table, everybody just groaned.
Yes.
Be like, oh, God, but governance is so boring. It's so essential, isn't it?
It is so essential, but it's definitely something you've got to have everybody on board, or it will just be boring and someone will see it like as a paper exercise.
I know. We got to come up with a better word for it.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe just start calling governance innovation. I mean, everybody loves the I word. Everybody hates the G word.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true.
All right. So I'll leave you with that as my brilliant passing idea. You're going to rename your enterprise governance organization as the Enterprise Innovation Organization.
Perfect.
So, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been a really great conversation with you, and I've really enjoyed it, Deb.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary Fran, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good. And keep up the good work at MITRE, which I know you will.
Thank you.
If you joined us late today or just came across this on your LinkedIn feed, do not despair. You can watch the full episode. We'll be here on LinkedIn for probably the rest of today. And then you can also find this interview on CIO.com and on CIO's YouTube channel. CIO's Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation with CIO Deborah Youmans of MITRE Corp as much as I did. If you want to be sure you don't miss any of our future shows, take a moment to subscribe to that YouTube channel, and you'll find on there more than 150 episodes of other CIO Leadership Live interviews, along with several international editions of the podcast that have spun out and are now featuring CIOs from Canada, India, the Middle East, New Zealand, and Australia. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you here again next time.